Story number 1, The Strange Christmas Visitor, a Mysterious Encounter on a Cold Winter Night. On Christmas Day 2008, I had a strange visitor at my house in Bloomington, Indiana. It was not Santa Claus, as far as I know. The day began as usual, with the exchange of presents around the Christmas tree. I cooked an early Christmas dinner for family and friends, and everyone had left by 5 p.m. except my sister and brother-in-law who lived with me. They were sleeping in a bedroom at the end of the hallway, with the door open. I went to my bedroom with my dog Toby and shut the door behind us. Toby climbed onto the foot of my bed, as he usually does. It was cold, so I wrapped myself in blankets and dozed off for about an hour. Just as I was drifting off, I heard the latch on my bedroom door click open. I waited a few seconds for my sister or brother-in-law to say something, but there was no other sound. It was almost 7 p.m., so my bedroom was pitch black. I had left lights on in the kitchen, bathroom, and living room, which should have illuminated the hallway. I could see whoever was at the door just by lifting my head. I pushed the blankets down and raised my head off the pillow, but as soon as I could see who was in the doorway, a bright light shone directly into my eyes. I shielded my eyes and shouted, "Turn off that light. You're blinding me." I was startled awake by a sudden light shining in my face, and I heard the latch on my bedroom door close. I have a touch lamp by my bed, so I turned it on and looked around the room, but there was no one there except for my dog, Toby. Toby, a Dutch Shepherd, is well trained as a watchdog and personal protection dog, but he didn't seem alarmed. I wondered if my sister or brother-in-law needed something, so I let Toby outside to check. However, when I went into the hallway, I saw that both of them were still in their beds. I took Toby into the living room and let him outside, but there was no one there either. I was left feeling puzzled and a little unnerved by the strange occurrence. I usually don't get scared by noises or lights, but this situation was particularly eerie. I also knew that the latch on my bedroom door was broken and required a distinctive jiggling motion to engage properly, so I was sure that someone had closed the door. As I tried to go back to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to keep Toby close by for the rest of the night as a precaution. I am confident that the latch on my bedroom door was closed when I went to bed, and I am certain that it was the sound of the latch that I heard during the strange incident. When I left my bedroom, the latch was closed again. I couldn't understand how my sister or brother-in-law could have come into my room, gone back to their own beds, and gotten under the covers in the short amount of time it took me to get to the hallway. However, I assumed it had to be one of them, as my dog Toby always barks and growls at anyone and anything he doesn't recognize immediately. When my brother-in-law woke up to get ready for work that night, I asked him what he wanted earlier in the evening when he supposedly opened my door. He looked puzzled and told me that he never got up and definitely didn't open my door. He had slept soundly the entire time. I then asked my sister if she wanted something earlier that morning when she supposedly opened my door. She looked puzzled and said that she had dozed off and on, but she never got out of bed and didn't see or hear anything in the hallway. She usually keeps her bedroom door open and faces the hallway so she can see anyone coming and going in the house. Who was the mysterious person who visited me on Christmas, and how did they enter and exit so quickly? During the holiday season, it's common for people to think about their loved ones who are no longer with them. As I lay down to sleep, I was thinking about how happy I was that my small family had a nice Christmas, but it would have been even better if my mother or brother had been alive to celebrate with us. I like to think that it was my brother's spirit stopping by to say Merry Christmas. I still think of you too. However, I have been unable to figure out what happened or find a logical explanation for the strange event. I'm partly afraid that my heart stopped while I was sleeping and the light I saw was the bright light that some people report seeing during near-death experiences. Of course, it's typical for me to see the stairway to heaven and mess up my chance at eternal paradise by saying turn out that light. I've made a note to myself to watch my language if I ever see a bright light again. Story number 2, A Mysterious Christmas Visitor, the Ghostly Encounter at the Puzzle Table. It was the Christmas season in either 1995 or 1996, and we were at my aunt's house on a reservation in North Dakota. Some of my family members were in the living room watching television, while the kids were either playing in their rooms or sleeping. My uncle, aunt, and I were sitting at the table putting together a puzzle. My cousin, who worked at the casino, usually came home around midnight or 1 a.m. On this particular night, as she approached the house, she looked in the window and saw me sitting at the table with my uncle across from me. However, she also saw someone standing to the left of me and someone else standing in the corner. She didn't think much of it and walked into the house, greeting everyone and putting her stuff away before joining us at the table. As we were sitting there talking, she looked at me and asked who had been standing next to me a few minutes ago and who had been in the corner. I told her that no one had been standing there, and she said, "Yeah, there was definitely someone standing next to you. It looked like our mom, and she was playing with your hair." My cousin saw someone standing next to me, running their hand through my long hair, as I was putting a puzzle together with my aunt and uncle. They said it looked like a mother doing this to a child. My cousin also saw another person standing behind the first one. I was probably only 12 or 13 years old at the time, and this incident scared me a little. We eventually thought that the person might have been my cousin's mom, who passed away on her birthday a week before Christmas in 1992. In our family, we consider our aunts and uncles to be just like our parents. Despite this realization, we still couldn't figure out who the person standing in the corner was. Strange things seem to happen around Christmas time, and we like to think it's my cousin's mom visiting us. Story number 3, The Haunted House, a tale of Christmas shadows and strange occurrences. From the moment we moved into our small, 90-year-old home in the small town of Bluffton, Indiana, I always felt like I was being watched. This would have been around 1996, and we lived there until I was 19 years old. One Christmas, I had a friend spend the night, and the heat shut off briefly while we were sitting in the living room watching TV. The temperature dropped significantly, and as I stood up to turn up the heat, the Christmas tree began shaking violently. Ornaments were falling off in all directions, and my friend and I were terrified. We ran upstairs and lay down on my bed, with my white cat joining us. My door was slightly open, and when I looked out into the dark hallway, I saw a tall, white figure running down it. This frightened me greatly. I turned to my friend and she acknowledged that she had seen the exact same thing. She never spent the night over again. Years passed and things were uneventful until I became severely ill with a chronic illness and was frequently hospitalized. That's when the strange things began. After coming close to death twice, I started to be able to sense things that no one else seemed to be able to. I once again felt that nagging sensation of being watched, but this time I ignored it and the illness went into remission. Once again, the activity, if you could call it that, stopped. When I was 18, I began to experience things like never before. Upon the death of my beloved grandfather, I became preoccupied with death and frequently visited cemeteries. That's where I noticed an increase in the activity. It started with voices. It was like a TV had been turned on, and there was a flurry of voices coming from downstairs, or even more frightening, outside my room. My parents were always asleep when this would happen, and my room was right next to theirs, with a vent so I could hear them sleeping next door. I would get up and check all the rooms, but there was no TV on, nothing to account for the voices. I was getting more and more scared as the voices started happening every night. That's when I started seeing shadow figures. They varied in size, but they were always human-shaped, except for one night. I was walking out of my room with my cat in my arms when she began to growl ferociously. I have to say, she never does this. She's normally an extremely docile cat, so I was shocked to see her acting in such a way. That's when I looked down the hall and saw a shadow the size of a large dog running down the hall at us. We don't own a dog. We had owned one before I became ill, but we were forced to give it away because we could no longer provide it with the proper care it deserved. My cat growled and growled until the shadow finally disappeared. For all the other times that I saw shadow figures, it never took the form of a dog again. From that point on, the shadow figures were strictly human-shaped, some tall and some child-sized, but they frightened me to death. I would lie in my bed at night, tortured by the fear that I was going insane because no one else was experiencing this. When I confessed my experiences to my parents, they took me to a psychiatrist who could find nothing wrong with me. I continued seeing the shadow figures until the last few months we lived in the house. As the months went on, I began feeling a dark aura spreading around the place. It was a heaviness, an uncomfortable feeling that I could never quite shake. Sometimes, I would get frustrated with whatever was there. I would leave a room and turn off the light. The light switch would make an audible click every time someone turned it on or off. Each time I would shut it off, the click would echo and I would turn around to see the light back on again. Finally, I had enough and said in an annoyed voice, "Quit playing games. Could you just shut the light off, please?" Sure enough, right before my eyes, the light shut off. One time, I shut the light in my bedroom before leaving the house. When my parents came back home, my dad said to me, "What did I tell you about leaving a light on?" I replied, shocked, but I shut it off when I left. He had nothing to say about that. Another time, I was lying in bed when I heard the audible noise of something sitting down on my desk chair. Sure enough, when I sat up, there was a visible indentation in the center of the chair where someone would have been sitting. Things would get so bad sometimes that I would be forced to sleep in my parents' bedroom, like a child. In August 2008, we moved to a new house far away from the old one. Since then, I have not experienced anything abnormal here and the aura feels much lighter. It's possible that my dabbling in the paranormal, such as trying to communicate with spirits and visiting cemeteries to provoke ghosts, may have caused all the grief in the old house. However, one night when I returned to the old house to retrieve some of my things, I saw a dark figure run across the yard. I quickly drove away and never looked back. Story number 4, The Strange Old Couple at Christmas, a Scary Encounter. A few years ago, around Christmas time, I took my 5-year-old niece to the mall to have our picture taken with Santa. While we were in line, I noticed an old man and woman sitting on a bench watching the kids see Santa. The old man came up to us and told my niece that she looked very cute. I thanked him and he returned to the bench with his wife. After we got our picture taken, we waited a while for it to be printed. I asked the photographer why our picture hadn't been printed yet, and he told me that my mother had already gotten it and pointed out an old lady who had been watching us in line before. I went to the old man and, presuming he was the old lady's husband, asked him to give me the picture back. The old man seemed embarrassed and told me that his wife had grabbed our picture by accident and meant to take their granddaughter's picture. He apologized, but I had a gut feeling that something was off about them. Next, I took my niece to the merry-go-round and, magically, the old people were there again, still without any kids. A lady waved at my niece and smiled a big, toothless smile at us. At this point, I decided it was best if we left them. We went to my niece's favorite restaurant, which is almost all the way across town from the mall. I felt much more relaxed as we had lunch, completely forgetting about those weird old people. As we were driving home, my niece spotted a playground close to a much smaller mall and begged me to stop there. There was a young man with a little boy on the swing, so we weren't alone. Another car pulled into the parking lot shortly after we arrived. We played for a little while, and then I noticed that no one had gotten out of the car. When I looked at the driver's side, sure enough, it was the same old people. The man had followed us from the mall to the restaurant and back to the playground. He was staring at me and my niece as if he were hunting us. I noticed that he had his arm down and was moving it up and down, and then it dawned on me that he was masturbating in his car. I didn't want to frighten my niece, so I discreetly alerted the young man who was also at the park. I quickly got my niece into the car and drove to the small parking lot to call the police and mall security. I didn't want to stay long enough for my niece to see the man being arrested, so I gave the police my number and left for my dad's work, where I figured we would be safe in case the old couple followed us again. A few hours later, the police called back and told me that by the time they arrived, the couple had already left. However, they were searching for the description of the car that I had given them. It makes me physically sick to think about the fact that these old people are out and about and seem completely harmless, when they are actually perverted sex offenders or, even worse, kidnappers. Story number 5, Christmas Stalker, A Tale of Terror and Harassment. This incident happened many years ago, but it will always stay with me and change my views on allowing my kids to have their own separate phone lines. It was a few weeks after Christmas, and my parents had gotten me my own personal phone with my own separate phone line because that was the cool thing back then, before cell phones were big. I had given my friends the number, because who wouldn't? Anyway, it was about 3 a.m. and I was sleeping when my phone suddenly began to ring. I thought, that's odd. Who can be calling this early? We all have to be up for school in the morning. So I answered it, but all I could hear was breathing on the other end. I just laughed it off as someone just messing with me and hung up. I tried to return to sleep, but my phone rang again. This time, I answered it and said, "Who is this?" Still nothing, just breathing. At this point, I was beginning to get irritated. I told them to stop calling me and then hung up. I laid down again for about 30 minutes when my phone rang for a third time that morning. I was mad, so I answered and said, "This isn't funny. I'm trying to sleep. I have school in the morning. Stop calling me." This time, it was a man's voice. It sounded very gravelly, and he laughed and said, "I can see you. You're very pretty. Why don't you come out and play in the snow with me?" I hung up and started crying. I ran to my parents' room and woke up my mom, telling her what had happened. She woke up my dad, and I had to tell him everything. They both got up, and my dad went into my room and checked the windows and everything. He made sure all the locks on the doors were locked and told me it was just someone playing a sick joke and that everything would be fine. He told me to unplug my phone from the outlet, so I finally went back to sleep until my mom woke me up for school. I got up and started getting ready. When I opened the blinds to my window that led to the backyard, I noticed that there were handprints all over my window. I called my parents, and they were totally freaked out. My dad immediately called the police. The police came out to take a report and look at the evidence. They decided to go to the backyard, and sure enough, there were a set of footprints in the snow that led right up to my window. They had gone from the front of the house, through the back of my window, back to the door, and back to the front door. The police thought the guy had tried to get into the house. Hello and thank you for watching my video. I really appreciate your support and I hope you enjoyed the content. If you liked this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to my channel, and hitting the bell icon to stay up to date on all my new videos. Your support means a lot to me and I can't thank you enough for watching. Thank you again and have a great day.